What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today is our January 2023 Instagram Q&A episode. I have to start adding the years to these because this is now, I think, the third time we have done the January Instagram Q&A. So for proper archiving purposes, we have to start updating the context of our labels. As always, before we jump into the questions, Brian, hit us off with some updates, please.
Man, we have so many questions today that I can't even find my updates on here. There we go. Okay, so updates. Yeah, it was Vivi's birthday yesterday. She turned 3, which is wild. Because she was born, I guess in early 2020. So, yeah, that also means it's been 3 years since all this COVID stuff happened, which is just wild to kind of sit back and reflect on. But I guess all my updates kind of follow a similar theme here, which again kind of takes on this framework of overall health and the idea of health span over life versus just lifespan. And so my dad has high blood pressure. I do not. I have pretty normal blood pressure, like with 120 over 80 being normal. I have some days where it's lower and some days where it's a little higher, but never more than, 5 or 6 in either direction. But I decided that it would be interesting just from a data standpoint to buy a blood pressure cuff off Amazon, and it was like $37. And so I've been doing it now for a little over a week, every morning and every night between 6 and 7 a.m. and 6 and 7 p.m. just to kind of get a sense of where my blood pressure is. And also, most importantly, what I'm most curious about is how it's affected both acutely and longer term by dietary and exercise interventions. And so when I started doing it, I was just coming off a pretty bad weekend of eating, and it was slightly high, which I thought was interesting. Had a really, really great week of eating last week where I had tons of fiber, tons of fruits and vegetables, not as much or very little sugar, and aside from what's natural in fruits. And then over the course of the week, I watched my blood pressure decrease, and at the end of the week, on Friday or Saturday, it was down at like 110 over 75 or something like that, which is pretty low. And then I had this weekend for Vivi's birthday, coming for full circle again. She wanted a vanilla cake with vanilla icing, so I made a funfetti cake at home. And I hadn't had any sugar for a week. Anyways, I got stoned, ate a bunch of the cake. A couple days later, woke up, and my blood pressure is starting to creep up again. So this morning now, like 2 or 3 days after I had the cake, it was 122 over 85, which is one of the higher numbers that I've seen from that thing. And so I find it just really interesting, the acute effect of these things where there wasn't really much of an acute effect at all. Like my blood didn't really absorb the sugar or seem to have a response to that in the first 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. But 2 or 3 days later, it seems to be affected by it. Noticed a similar thing with alcohol, where initially I had 2 drinks and my blood pressure was super low afterwards. And then over the next like 2 or 3 days after that, it kind of started to climb again. So I find that really interesting, just looking at like health and life, but also looking at like people that don't care about health or health span and just kind of eat whatever, don't really exercise, things like that. And how this stuff must accumulate cumulatively over time and just progressively get worse and worse. And then I started thinking about exercise, and I haven't like acutely checked exercise. I mean, I know that one of the unique things about exercise is that in the moment of the exercise, it makes your blood markers look awful. Like your blood pressure goes up to like 200 over 120. And like in any capsule, someone would look at exercise and be like, oh my God, that's awful for your health. But then over the course of time, it has that reversal effect on your blood pressure, which decreases it. And so this then all feeds into this kind of obsession that I have now with zone 2 cardio and these different kind of cardio modalities that I've talked about over the course of a number of episodes. And so zone 2 has been something that I've been doing now, like I would say a minimum of twice a week, but I'm really shooting for more like 3 to 4 times a week when I can. And like, as we've discussed, I just kind of find it really miserable and monotonous for the most part. Because you're not just like walking, I love because I can really zone out. And people that are really good at zone two, they can do the same thing. They can zone out kind of like when I'm walking and just kind of ignore it and just do it. But for me, being relatively fledgling into this venture into zone two cardio, I still find it quite cumbersome and exhausting. And I feel like even though it's supposed to be in the absence of lactate, meaning that you're not supposed to progressively feel more fatigue as you go through it. It's supposed to be just like this steady, consistent effort where it doesn't actually get worse. I'm struggling with that boundary a little bit. And so I do venture up into like, oh no, there's some lactate coming through. Like this is starting to suck. Okay, I need to dial back my effort a little bit type thing. But I'm considering buying a piece of equipment that will allow me to do that at home because right now I'm paying drop-in fees to go to a gym since I don't have a gym membership. And it's been like 0 degrees out here the last couple days. So yeah, just toiling with the idea of whether I want to get like an assault bike type thing or a rower. I'm kind of leaning toward a rower, although it's a little less space efficient. And then also I've considered incline walking because walking doesn't get me into zone two. Even walking fast doesn't get me into zone two, but I think an incline walk would. So anyway, kind of toiling with those. And then the final piece of the update is that when B's program starts again on 2/13 with a new hypertrophy cycle, because we're finishing up the strength cycle right now, I'm going to include some general recommendations for cardiovascular fitness into my programming since it's something I'm doing. I think that it should be included in there. And people following my program can either do it or not do it as they probably haven't been. But I'm going to include it. So it'll probably have 3 zone 2 sessions a week, maybe 2, somewhere 2 to 3 zone 2 sessions, and then probably 1 more like VO2 max priming session, which will either be like short intervals with longer rest periods, or some weeks it might be what they call a VO2 max output sequence. Basically, I don't know what that, I totally botched that, but basically it's 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off for 4 to 6 rounds. So somewhere between 32 and 48 minutes of 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off. And the 4 minutes should be challenging for the 4 minute period, but sustainable within each 4 minute period, if that makes sense. So anyways, those are my updates, and I will continuing updating these same things as we go. Aaron, what's up with you, dude?
Yeah, so I'm going to jump into mine. I have been, and I think we talked about this. It is something that I have recently been definitely adding more with clients in the last like 4 months ish. Coincidentally, or I guess I could say conversely, I am opting for a lot more of like the hit style stuff just from a pure time management standpoint. Something that I will always try and do is relate things back to like practicality with myself. And like if I had in my program like 3 days of like 45 minutes of cardio, like, and I'm not like dieting or something like that, I'm not going to do it. I just know I wouldn't. But right now, if I have like, okay, we're doing 8 rounds of hit, like I can get to the gym, I warm up and I'm in and out in like 20, 22 minutes. Like that's realistic. And I cannot say I've been enjoying it at all. It has been just gut wrenching. I feel horrendous performing it. It feels so bad, but I do like the challenge, right? And just in pursuit of health, like we've talked about. And I think we could shelf this conversation for another episode in and of itself. But I would even feel as confident saying that in optimal pursuit, or shouldn't even call it an optimal pursuit, in pursuit of pushing like the extremes, the limits of like natural hypertrophy or the amount of muscle mass that your body can carry or can hold on to, I would say in those pursuits that begins to be a negative from a health standpoint. The amount of food you have to push, like I'm getting to that point now where I'm like, it was 20 minutes before the podcast and I was like, I need to get another meal in because I can't eat it at 10:15 p.m. when we're wrapped up. And like, I did not want it whatsoever, but it was 300 grams sweet potatoes, 150 grams of beef, 200 grams of vegetables. And it's just like, I want that want that muscle mass. I want the scale to go up. And that's just like a trade-off of feeding myself when I obviously do not want it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there's definitely a an effect of food on long-term health too. I mean, as we've discussed, like just putting your body and your organs and your digestive tract through an excess of calories over time, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, 100%. Like if you're going to do cardio, you have to eat more food, and then there's definitely a bit of an effect there too.
Definitely. Okay, I'll keep it short here because we have a bunch of questions. I have my first weekly average 200 plus pounds in almost 2 years. I'm very, very happy about that. Um, we will see how far we push it. I can't remember if I talked about it last week or not, but I had the number. We're aiming for like basically 204 to 208 for a reevaluate period and see how fat I am, sort of thing, before progressing. And then what I'm most excited about, this happened yesterday. Back in September, when I was wrapping up my final training session here, I hit like a little kind of mini milestone that I was pumped about: 4 plates per side on the hack
Yep.
squat for a set of 10. I was really, really pumped about that. I've been working towards it like all summer. And
I
on
remember.
Monday,
Yeah.
on Monday, I was able to match that, except in this training cycle, hack squat is second in the rotation. And I have like gnarly sets of leg extension with like drop sets and rest pause sets before it. So going into the hack squat, like my legs are already like, I can feel the pump in them already. And then I go in and I was really, really pumped about that.
That's awesome, dude. That's legit. I mean, so how do you feel about putting the leg extension first? Because that's something I love as well, is putting that like short overload isolation movement before the heavy hitter lengthen movement.
I I do like it. The difference is in this training program, the training style is like a lot of intensity techniques. So with that, like I'm carrying fatigue going in. You know, it was like, okay, I have one top set, I have a back off set, and then I have a like 2 myo rep sequences after that. Like, you know, so 4 sets, you know, 4 mini sets, I should say, like taken to failure. And that's okay, sweet. I'm done with that. Now let's go hack squat, sort of thing. The upside is I don't have to warm up nearly as hard. And I do like that. So I basically did like, okay, empty hack squat, 6 reps, 1 plate per side, 6 reps, 2 plates per side, 6 reps. I go to 3 plates per side for 4 reps, and then I go right into my, you know, give it as many as I can at 4 plates per side, sort of thing. So I do like that, not having to warm up as much.
And your knees probably feel a little bit nicer than going directly into that heavy loaded compound.
Yeah, yeah. But one thing I would say is before any leg day, my warm up is on a bike. So either like a spin bike or like the Airdyne, and I will go until I get at least a little bit of like lactic buildup in the quads.
Okay.
Like I want blood flow in there good before I start. Um, but yeah, that's it for me. Maybe I'll have cooler things next week, but I'm
Sweet.
really pumped about that hack update.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. Because I feel like that was also after you went through like a strength phase where you were doing like sets of 5 or 6 on there. And then you just kept kind of upping the reps thereafter. And it was like a number of weeks working toward that goal of 10. And then to be able to hit that now without training that machine consistently and having leg extensions first is super cool.
Yeah, I'm really pumped about it and see how far I can progress it over the next however many weeks.
Very cool. Sweet. Well, let's jump into Instagram questions. We have 29 of them. And so we're going to try and get through them pretty quickly, not dwell on any of them too long. And then we have a few that I think should be really, really short answers. So let's just jump into it. The first one, it looks like Aaron's already prepared for, so I'll kick it over to you. What are good upper body exercises on the Smith machine?
So I tried to keep it to ones that like actually use it. Like I had in here, I do have one that I have like inverted rows. And I mean, like that's using the Smith machine, but you're not using the utility of the Smith machine. You can do that, you know, anywhere you have a barbell. But I have bent over row. That's probably my favorite upper body movement in a Smith machine. And I have here any degree of horizontal pressing, right? So flat, you know, press, an incline press, a low incline press, and then to round that out, like an overhead press, you know, like a military press style one as well. The inverted rows, which I noted, the JM press, which is like kind of like the most highly regarded compound esque movement for a tricep, you know, using some subjective labeling there. I would say that is probably best performed in a Smith machine, because of the already established um, movement path. And then the last one I have is like a wide grip high pull, so like kind of like a snatch grip high pull that I will sometimes perform in a Smith machine when I would do those.
Yeah. I don't have much to add beyond what you said. I do have a couple of caveats. For one, like this is actually a question that's come up a lot in our Paragon Facebook group because we have a number of members that are at a Planet Fitness where they don't have barbells; they only have Smith machines and dumbbells. And so we're in a strength cycle right now. And so it's not really a big deal, I think, in hypertrophy phases for people to use a Smith machine for pretty much any movement. But I think in a strength phase, it maybe becomes a little bit more of a nuanced answer here. So, like this is an upper body question, so I'm not going to deviate too far. But like things like a deadlift that you're lifting, if you're trying to do like a heavy sets of 1 to 5 reps, I'm not so sure I'm a huge fan of doing deadlifts in the Smith machine, given how you're locked into that vertical path. Similarly, though, I'm not a huge fan of it for bench presses for that same reason, because a bench press is meant to have like that sort of S curve where it comes down and then comes back up again. And so I'm not as huge of a fan of that because it takes away that natural pressing line. But I do like it, as you said, for like overhead presses and wide grip high pulls and things like that. I think bent over rows are great as well. And I think that even RDLs can be good because you do want to keep the bar a little bit more straight up and down, and you can facilitate that through the hips moving horizontally and not have to worry as much about what's happening with the bar and the torso. So yeah, I think there's some uses for it for sure. I think that for hypertrophy phases, it's fine. I just think there's definitely some limitations when it comes to strength phases for sure.
Definitely.
Yep.
Moving
Next question's yeah, go ahead.
Moving on to number 2, are single leg extensions a good option for hypertrophy?
Yeah, so I mean, like any single leg movement, I think they're fine. If you want to spend double the amount of time to get the same benefit, then yeah, that would be the way I'd say it. I mean, in general, I think, if you're going to choose a single limb movement, I think there should be a reason that you're choosing the single limb movement instead of the bilateral one, because it does take more time, more energy. Even if it's not more time, like if you're resting less between sets, you could argue it does take more energy. You have to work to failure twice to get the same benefit as working to failure once, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, they're fine. It's just like, why would you choose that instead of the bilateral one? Like when you're doing a split squat, it's obvious. You're like, I'm doing this specifically because it's a single leg movement and it provides these benefits. Or a 1-arm lat pull down, it's like, I'm doing that because I can adduct my arm and get more stretch in my lat. I don't see similar benefits to doing a single leg extension.
I will just add here that there's sometimes I will rotate it in, if very limited on exercise options and equipment. Another time where I have used it in, personally, this is something that I find I can get a better kind of VMO contraction doing it single leg because I can line things up a little bit better. Like, what one thing that I find is like when I'm doing it single leg, I'll kind of really pivot
Mm-hmm.
myself to the side a little bit so that that leg and everything is like directly in line. Whereas when I have both legs in front of me, like it just doesn't line up as good as I can with a single leg. But I'm sure in actual practicality, the difference is probably just, a little bit marginal. But I feel like it also helps me to, I'll find like one of mine kind of overpowers the other a little bit. It's just more to focus on 2 legs versus one.
Mm-hmm.
But admittedly, like you said, it's a lot of extra time, extra effort, going through that to failure again, sort of thing. But it is something that I will maybe rotate in like once per year, a
Mm-hmm.
cycle of doing single leg.
Yeah, I did it when I was recovering from PRP because I wanted to be able to assess both legs uh, independent of the other. And so I found that super helpful then as well. All right, cool. Thoughts on programming horizontal pulls before vertical pulls in a full upper body day?
I don't see any real utility for or against here. And
Yeah.
that's just, my personal standpoint.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, Yes. I think it's fine. I'm not even going to expand on that because we have 29 questions to get to. I think it's it's totally fine. I see no reason for it to be good or bad, and I think it really just depends on you, what you want to do, and I would probably recommend switching that at some point over the course of the training year.
Definitely. Okay, Brian, we will kick over to you. Realizing that volume is so individual, what is a good starting point of volume for a new client?
Reps, exercises, and frequency in parentheses. Um, yeah, this is quite a good question. And so what I usually do with a new client is first ask them what has worked for them in the past. And that's usually the starting point that I go with. And so if this person was on a relatively moderately volume program, somewhere between 6 and 18 sets, say, I usually will say, hey, that seems like if that's working for you, then that's probably a decent place to start. I will usually veer towards the lower end of that so that we can then build into volume from there if we so desire. Whereas I think the opposite of accidentally starting too high and having to take volume away can have some kind of psychological defeating properties for the client. Um, so yeah, I think starting slightly lower than what was working for them is not a bad approach. But like, say I had a new client come in and they were like, I don't even want to tell you what volume I was doing prior. I just want to like learn your ways or something like that. I would honestly probably start them somewhere between 7 and 10 sets per muscle group for the most part, and assess from there. So, when I do check-ins with clients, we have a form with subjective feedback on it that they fill out. It's got like 10 or 12 questions on it. And so I'll ask them about how sore they're getting in subsequent days, how long that soreness lasts, how debilitating it is, etc. I will ask them about how much disruption they're feeling in their intended target muscle during the session. I'll ask them how they feel post session. So the idea of, I just trained legs and now I have to either walk up and down the stairs. Like, hey, how does that feel walking up and down the stairs after training legs? Like, if it's a walk in the park, then you probably need to do more or work harder. So, I mean, through a lot of these subjective measures, you can kind of get a sense of whether the work that you're doing is sufficient. But then at the end of the day, of course, it's progress that trumps all. And so like people have this obsession with volume, but if someone's making good progress at 6 sets per week, I don't see a reason to have them do 12 sets per week. So I think there's definitely a like kind of minimum effective dose that can get you most of the benefits that the maximal effective dose can get you. And so then it becomes a conversation with the client about time and commitment and, what they really want to get out of this. And like, if you can get like, we've referenced the Schoenfeld meta from 2017, the same meta that says 10 to 20 sets is the optimal amount. Well, the group that did 5 to 9 sets got 84% of the benefit of the group that did 10 to 20 sets. And so now you have an opportunity cost to ask yourself, like, hey, if I can get 85% of the benefit in the short term, not even to mention the long term, because I very much believe that over the course of 10, 12 years training, if you're doing 5 to 8 sets or doing 10 to 20 sets, I think you're probably going to get to the same place at the end anyways. It's just a matter of how quickly you get there. So it really just becomes a question of opportunity cost, but finding that optimal dose, start lower, give yourself room to build up, give yourself room to build effort into it, and assess with subjective variables.
That is exactly what I was going to say. Like, start low, assess effort first, verify that effort is adequate, and assess from there. And I think every time that I've had a client come in and they're like, hey, I like high volume, or they send me what they're doing. Because, and the only reason I know this is because like I am like a recovering high volume person. Like I call bullshit. And I'm like, send me demos of like these 3 exercises. Cause they'll say they're doing like 15 sets of chest on like one day, and then they train chest again in another like 3 days. And I'm like, no, you're fucking not. No, you're fucking not. And I'll like send me a video and I'm like, okay, these are like 5-6 RIR sets,
Yeah.
So yeah, start low, assess effort, and then go up from there, sort of thing.
Yep. Yep.
This next
throughout
one, I
the next
think,
game.
Brian, will kick over to you. This one you'll be better suited for this one. What are the pros and cons of different progression schemes for hypertrophy? How to choose the right one for you?
Yeah, the first thing I think of when I hear this question is going back to the evidence-based nihilism episode we did 2 episodes ago, where I talked specifically about the individual data associated with progressing with load versus progressing with reps. And ultimately, for hypertrophy, they found a very slight increase in progressing with reps compared to load for hypertrophy. Alternatively, they found load to be better for strength. No surprise there. But then within the individual data points, we did see some people progress better in hypertrophy with load, and other people progress better in strength with reps. So it is very individual. And I think ultimately, finding there is no wrong way, I guess would be the way of saying it. Like, as long as you are trying to progress in some manner, I don't really know that you can even say pros and cons. Like, I guess the pros and cons would be associated with the type of movement you're doing. And so, like, my argument would be that maybe doing like really big compound movements for sets of 15 plus reps is maybe not like the best use of your energy and your time. But at the same time, that's exact study that I referenced above found that when you or no, Josh was interpreting the study and basically came to this assumption that when you're doing a big compound movement for higher reps, meaning lighter loads, that you can better recruit the target muscle than you can at heavier weights, because there are these like kind of mini compensations that occur that your body doesn't even that you're not even really intending on doing. So I don't really think there's anything like pro and con, wrong, good, bad, like hit or top of a rep range, add weight, work back up, or just micro load. I like I'm biased, but I love creating small wins every week. And Aaron's kind of the opposite. Aaron is okay just like not progressing for a number of weeks, and then 4 weeks later he adds a rep and he's like, yes, I added a rep. So for me, I'm much more like maybe it's more ADD with it or whatever, but I like knowing each week that I did something to improve on the last week. And so that's why for me, psychologically, I like either micro loading, where I know that I'm adding 1 to 2 pounds a week to something just to know that I'm improving, or the way that I tend to program in general is this idea of increasing effort week to week, which includes adding partials and then lengthen sets, and this whole mechanism of forcing progression that may not actually be progression, right? So what I mean by that is if I did 10 reps on a bent over row and then the next week I did 10 reps plus 3 partials, it could be argued that I didn't actually progress because I still only made 10 reps, but I did more than I did last week. And so in my mind, that feels like a win to me. And so I don't think there's necessarily a wrong or a right way of going about this. Like, my way is not better than Aaron's and his way is not better than mine. At the end of the day, I probably am only adding 1 rep every 4 weeks as well. It's just I'm taking a slightly different route to get to my 1 rep than Aaron is.
Yeah, I mean, I think to try and answer the question a little bit, I'll speak on three really simple ones. Right, we have a linear load, right, adding weight each week. The pro of that is you get that dopamine hit of like, oh wow, I added 5 pounds over what I did last week. The con is once you move out of like the early intermediate stage, like that runway gets really fucking short, really fucking fast, and it also gets really frustrating really fast because you're like, why can't I add? I did 310 pounds. Why can't I add 315? And the reality is like you started at 290. You probably could have started at 305. The first 2 weeks weren't really progressions because you started too low and then you max out relatively quickly. The microloading that Brian mentioned, I think, is fantastic. It's a bit of a psychological win. Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it something like once, like within like 2 to 3% of a load. Like we have it as a human, proprioception. We have like, it's imperceivable, the difference, like
I
100
think it's
pounds versus like 102 pounds or something.
I think it's under 1%.
Okay. Okay. So with the micro loading, like it may feel no different, even though it's a pound heavier, maybe 1.5 pounds heavier or something like that. So that one has pros there. The cons are most gyms don't have, change plates. You got to carry your own around, which isn't that big of a deal. Um, and then the last one that I would say my favorite, method of progression is increasing reps until reaching the top end of a rep range and then increasing load. So your progression model is both reps and then eventually weight. That one I feel like is a little bit kind of truer in keeping earnest effort. Okay, I'm trying really, really hard. I got 7. Next week I'm going to try really, really hard. If I can get 8, awesome. We're making progress. It's just slower in terms of looking at things from an absolute standpoint.
Yeah, the one caveat I would say to that double progression method is I have seen with clients and with myself plenty of times where it can go weeks and weeks and weeks, and me or them, we just cannot add a rep. Like a pull up, a weighted pull up is a great example of this. Like I can be at 70 pounds and just, it's like 5, 5, 5 every week. It's 5, it's 5, it's 5. And I just can't get 6 reps at 70 pounds. But if I put 73 pounds on there, I can still get 5, 5, 5, So I think that sometimes it's movement dependent, and sometimes you need to pull the lever of load, and sometimes you can pull the lever of reps, but it maybe depends on the movement at some level too.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah, that one for certain movements that are like a pull up, right? Very short, very, very short overload where it's the hardest there.
Yeah.
With load, yeah, very, very great point.
Yep. All right. I have 2 questions popping your way here. When are Aaron and Jenny publishing the Fitfluencers Guide to Surviving Bali?
We will never. I will say, like, I'm trying to think now. It's coming up on 4 years since the first time we came here. I think if I came here for the first time, like now, I wouldn't stay like we are. Um, it's changed a lot for sure. It's no longer a bit of like it's a gem to me and Jenny and a lot of us here, but it's like, it's no secret. People are relocating here for sure. Prices are significantly higher. Traffic is bonkers compared to what it used to be. So I would still recommend coming, but I would recommend getting off the beaten path a little bit. You can always ping me on Instagram with some kind of questions and stuff, but I wouldn't say surviving. Surviving here is very easy. You just have to accept that there are some things that are different from like housing build qualities and keeping animals and stuff outside of your house. Like there's regularly like ants around and things like that, and geckos on the walls, and like it's just the nature of what it is. But it is a good spot. I'm happy to be here for the year that we are here. Year at least, I should say.
Yeah, it sounds similar to my experience living in Costa Rica back in 2018 as well. Okay, what is your favorite low-cal condiment and favorite hot sauce?
Yeah, so I have 3 on the low calorie condiment. So like a spicy mustard, which is a brand new one for me, right? So since Aaron was like 5 years old up into literally like 4 months ago, I hated mustard. And then I was having some chicken at this cafe spot, and this chicken tasted amazing. And I asked the guy, I was like, "Hey, what is on this chicken?" And he was like, "Mustard." And my jaw hit the ground. I was like, I've been telling myself for like 30 years that I don't like mustard. And apparently I like mustard. So spicy mustard for sure. That's like, it's 0 calories. It's like literally effectively 0, which is pretty wild. G Hughes barbecue sauce. G Hughes is like a brand. They make a lot of like low calorie, sugar free type stuff. So the note I have here, 30 grams of the barbecue sauce is only 2 grams of carbs. Very, very low calorie. Primal Kitchen makes some good sauces and stuff as well. My favorite being their spicy ketchup. That has 0 sugar in it, which is actually quite cool. And that has only 2 grams per 15 carbs. The Primal Kitchen spicy ketchup will make you question why regular ketchup has so much bullshit in it because it tastes like exactly the fucking same and it has super clean, nice ingredients. It will really make you kind of question things there. Those are definitely my kind of top three favorites. And then for hot sauce, my favorite's always been Cholula. I do miss it when I'm outside the States, and I have to settle for sriracha over here, which I do like. I just prefer my eggs to have, Mexican hot sauce, not Asian hot sauce.
I do not use low cal condiments, and I also don't like spicy food. So when I'm dieting, I just don't use condiments, and when I am not dieting, I use honey mustard, ranch, and barbecue sauce with all the things in them. And that is my story.
when Brian's clients ask him, like, Brian, I'm dieting. I just, how do I deal with the chicken and the meat? I don't like the taste. Brian's just like, deal with it.
Right. Like, you're fucking dieting. Like, just deal with it. It's not supposed to be fun. God.
Cool. Let's kick this one over to you. Key points to think about when programming or red flags when looking at someone else's program.
Yeah, I feel like there could be like 1,000 answers to this question. Man, there's like, it's just, hypertrophy is so forgiving, and there's so many roads to Rome that I actually find myself these days not being as judgmental of programs and kind of being a little bit more accepting and being like, hey, a lot of different things work. So like, unless it's just atrocious and there's like really a number of things that stand out, like, man, like I don't even hold such a high opinion of like these super nuanced biomechanic movements anymore. Like if I looked at a program that didn't have any like biomechanically correct movements in them, and it was just like wide grip pull downs and hack squats and like whatever, like I would probably think that's fine. I guess like I would definitely, okay, actually no, this is I actually have a really good example here. So a guy a guy sent me a clip of Jason Khalipa's bodybuilding program that he writes for NC Fit. And I looked at it and I was literally just like, oh my God. It was all supersets, and it was all like descending rep scheme type stuff. It would be like 30, 20, 10 of glute bridges and banded pushdowns. That was one of the sequences. Another one was like, what was it? Like dumbbell front squats combined with bent over rows or something like that. And so all of these things are either like 30, 20, 10, or they're like, as many rounds as possible in 6 minutes. And so to me, I look at something like that and I'm like, okay, red flag, because there's no statements at all about how close we're working to failure. There's no fine print about how hard you should be working on each one, whether there's warm-up sets included, whether the 30, 20, 10 is just the same weight for all sets. All of it's done for time. And we know if there's one thing that is very confident in the research these days, it's pretty much that longer rest periods are better than shorter rest periods for hypertrophy. And so, yeah, I mean, looking at a program like that is so far from the principles of what make hypertrophy, and then to call it like a bodybuilding program. I mean, what I told the guys, I'm like, look, this is bodybuilding for somebody that still is obsessed with CrossFit. This is like, if you're a CrossFitter and you want to say you bodybuild, like you might be interested in something like this, but this is very far from an effective program for hypertrophy. So that would be like a big one for me. But like, as long as the program for the most part has like sufficient rest periods, has somewhere between 6 and 18 sets per body part per week, and uses movements that aren't dynamic. So you're not doing like Olympic lifting and calling it a bodybuilding program, or you're not making an entire program of like jump squats and kettlebell swings. Like it's really hard for me to look at a program and say that's just like a shit program, unless it's kind of those really big things that stand out to me.
Yeah, those are good points. The kind of two that came to my mind were, is it unrealistic? Right? Where it's like, okay, we're going to do like set of 100 on the bench press, and then we're going to superset that with like tricep dips, and then some other like bench movement. Like if it requires you to like hold down like 5 pieces of equipment at a time, which like there's no way you can unless you have an entire, a corporate gym, or sorry, not corporate gym, like Globo gym to yourself. That's one where I'm like, okay, this is completely unrealistic because you're not going to actually follow it, right? You're going to have to make massive modifications. The second one is, if there is no good explanation of why there are certain movements in it. The kind of crux of this is when you have, okay, we have like 4 sets of hack squat, and then we have like 4 sets of the V squat, and then 2 sets of like barbell back squat. I'm like, we have 3 different exercises using a bilateral like squat pattern movement. Why?
Right. Yeah.
Like that is one. Um, Another example would be like, okay, we have incline barbell bench press, and then we have like flies, and then we have like incline dumbbell bench press. We already did an incline bench press. Like,
Right.
why do we have
Right.
it in there twice, sort of thing? I'm talking about like in the same session.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are ones where you're like, people are just looking at machines in the gym and stacking them into a program, sort of thing. So superfluous movement patterns repeated on the same day, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that goes into the idea of junk volume. It's like once you've already hit a movement pattern with a decent line of press for that movement, using the incline, like there's just no reason to do it with dumbbells. Like put that on a different day, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, really good points there too. Next one is kind of a tongue-in-cheek question for me, but update on my New Year's resolution to eat more weed. And so for those that missed the New Year's episode, one of my things was I was going to stop smoking weed and only eat it. So I'm not necessarily trying to eat more weed. I'm just trying to eat weed. And it's been going great. It's now January 31st, and it's been 31 days. I haven't smoked weed. So yeah, it's been cool. I think the best thing so far about it has been that it makes me have to really think about whether I want to be high or not. Because when I smoke it, it's like less than an hour and I'm back to being normal again. But when I eat it, it's like, whew, you got like a 4 to 6 hour experience ahead of you. So do you want that? And so it's been nice. Like I have to think about it. And it also means that I'm usually not going to bed super high, which has been, I think, really nice for my sleep. At least my sleeping HRV has been improved in this last month. And so I don't know if that's because of the cardio that I'm doing, like the more zone 2 stuff, or if it potentially has to do with going to bed not high. So anyways, all positive so far. All right. Next question is there any good reason to use a dumbbell fly instead of a fly machine? And yes, I think for sure there potentially is. Most fly machines or cable crossover type things are going to be overloaded short, and a dumbbell fly is overloaded lengthened. And so, yeah, I think that there's plenty of reason to use a dumbbell fly. Any thoughts to add to that one, Aaron?
No, I mean, I that is the reason personally. I just don't like the dumbbell fly. I just don't like the how it makes my joints, shoulders kind of feel. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
sketches me out. But that is like the objectively correct answer that you provided.
Yep. What should we do if we experience elbow pain when pushing? So this would be tennis elbow on the backside. Golfer's elbow would be more on the inside. So that would be more of like a bicep curl pain. So when pressing, I think it's a tennis elbow on the outside of the elbow. Any thoughts on that, Aaron? Have you dealt with that before?
I have, but never when it would bother me with pressing, more tricep
Mm.
and bicep stuff. I mean, honestly, I would just one look up a protocol for tennis elbow, right? That's the beauty of the internet. A lot of these like rehab protocols and the research behind them is literally out there on the internet. I would look that up. I would probably start working around it with pressing movements that do not bother it, or maybe um, angles that do not bother it. So probably moving away from fixed pattern things like a barbell pressing, and maybe moving into like cable pressing, that sort of thing, where you have a little bit more free range of articulation that could reduce the triggering of that pain. But yeah, that's where I would start.
Yeah, I actually just had a one-on-one client that has been dealing with this, and so I sent him a really long voicemail on WhatsApp the other day, and basically told him the protocol that kind of worked for me when I went through that a number of years ago. And the first thing to do was switch everything to cables. Without a doubt, switching everything to cables is something that helped, and also has been just a long-standing stay within my program. Like I pretty much try to do almost all of my pressing movements and specifically tricep movements with cables now. But the other thing that really helped me, and this is a bit fringe, but back in the CrossFit days, we used something called Voodoo Floss, which was created by Kelly Starrett. And it's like it's like a BFR band almost that you can wrap really tight as a distraction around your joint. And so the protocol that we would use when we had elbow pain in CrossFit was to wrap it just above the elbow, and then do a series of elbow flexions. So you would be kind of do some curls with it on, and then you would do some like tricep push-ups with it on, and then you would kind of hang from a bar or some rings and kind of like twist your torso around a little bit, and then finish with some more elbow flexions, all with the band on. And it was awful. Like it would make it feel like your elbow was literally going to pop out of the joint. But once you would take it off, I don't know if it was just like the psychological piece of, oh my God, I thought my elbow was going to pop out of the joint and now it doesn't feel that way. But it very much helped, at least acutely in the moment, to the point where I could train pain free. And then, after training would calm down and the endorphins would go away and stuff, the pain would come back again. But at least it provided a distraction before training so I could get a good quality training session in. And it definitely didn't feel worse afterwards.
Yeah, I remember that stuff, man. Those days were it was insane, like how much I needed to use that. Like there was periods in my life where I was flossing my knees like multiple times per day, and
Yeah.
I haven't touched it. I don't even know if I have it anymore. I haven't probably touched it in like 4 years. So my knees feel great, but
Yeah.
yeah. I remember
Once you train.
the first time it was for one of my knees. Like you did it on me in the north the Cass Street gym, and like it was absolutely horrid. It was so much worse than I was expecting.
Yeah. No, yeah, it is really awful, but I do think it helps. So,
Yeah.
anyways, the next question is how to fix scapular winging uneven shoulder. And I don't even want to address this. I think that this goes beyond my scope. I think you need to go seek a PT or something, get some imaging work done. I don't really have much to say on that.
The only thing I will say on that is when you do find out, report back, because I do not believe I have scapular winging, but I want to have 100%. One of my shoulders is uneven. If you ever see a picture of me holding a barbell, my elbows are nowhere near in the same position. So, yeah, if you find out, report back.
Yep. I have the same thing. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I moved away from barbells, because every time I would do it, it would be 2 inches off, whether it's, one side closer to my face, one side further, or one side down, one side up. It just never felt good to me after 2015. So, how do you rate the straddle lift for glute training at home? Hard to load heavy and legs look wide. You have any thoughts on that?
I don't know what the straddle lift is, to be completely honest.
Okay. So I don't think it's a great glute training lift. In fact, I generally program it more for adductors when I program it. So I'm not sure if this person is a Paragon client or not, but I do tend to program this movement in our dumbbell only programs. And I usually tend to program it in our dumbbell only programs, usually in place of a glute movement. So that might be where the confusion comes in, but it's more because I understand that I can't just have you do single leg dumbbell hip thrusts all the time, because it's just not heavy enough. Like I can't have you do bilateral hip thrusts with dumbbell because it's just not heavy enough for 80-90% of the people. And it's very uncomfortable to also load a dumbbell on your hips. And so the way I look at this lift is that you're getting some glute stimulus from doing it, but I think it's more of an adductor movement pattern. And ultimately, it's just a way to add some additional lower body volume in that isn't necessarily going to be specific to your quads, your hams, your glutes, or wherever. It's more of kind of like a decently overall well-rounded movement that you can do at home and get some benefit from. And so I tend to program it maybe once a cycle in the dumbbell only programs at Paragon, but I'm definitely not doing it for glutes specifically.
For some reason, I was like reading it. I'm like, okay, straddle lift. I'm looking, and maybe it's one of those weird like deadlifts where one foot's like in front of the bar and the other foot's like behind the bar. Then when you started talking, I was like, okay, I'm a moron. I know exactly what this is. So
yeah, we call it the sumo range of motion squat in
okay,
Paragon, which I
yeah,
think is maybe a more common name for it.
yeah,
Um,
perfect name
but
there.
other people say straddle lift. The next question, I don't have anything to say. I think it was answered by himself. He said, "Why do I pee 3 to 4 times during training? I train for 2 hours and drink 2 to 3 liters." And so Aaron and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, "Well, that's probably why you're peeing 3 or 4 times. Like 2 3 liters is a lot of water."
Especially over like a 2 hour period. Like I'm probably at the gym for 75 minutes. I pee kind of right as I get there, and then I'm kind of weird and I'll just hold it till I'm done. Don't ask me why. I just want to be done. But yeah, I would say, I mean, 2 to 3 liters is
That's
considerable
significant.
amount. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably why.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Next question. You want to hit this one over here?
Yeah, best tips to approach RIR in training coming out of a deload. Why not go to 0 to 1 RIR the week after deload?
Yeah, so I think the answer here is that, if you're deloading, you're doing it to flush fatigue and possibly resensitize a little bit. And if you're doing a deload week, which is way further away from failure, then you essentially can get a stimulus just doing a little bit more than what you did the prior week. And so if you were to go to 0 to 1 RIR the week after deload, it's likely that you will get really, really sore because you kind of had that like resensitization week, lower effort, not really grinding super hard. And then even if you say, hey, well, I'm not going to get sore, maybe I follow a really low volume program, something like that. My statement would just be that you just don't need to. So where are you going to go from there? I think would be the next question to ask is like, okay, you went 0 to 1 RIR the week right after deload. Do you plan on just training the next 6 weeks at 0 to 1 RIR? Because I'll use an anecdote here. When I was younger, I didn't understand the need to ramp up effort at all. And I kind of trained like that too. I just basically went to failure on everything all the time. And what would happen is that I would hit a wall by week 2 or 3 of a cycle. And then I would spend the next 2 or 3 weeks just beating against that wall, not making progress. And all of the people I was reading at the time, this would be like late 90s, early 2000s, were talking about how you want to give yourself runway to build momentum for the cycle. And as you know, this go-getter 18 to 21-year-old, I just was like, no, I want the most stimulus as quickly as possible all the time. I don't want to play this long game. And so I would do everything to failure and I would hit a wall and get stuck and progress would stop. And then I would have to either switch programs, which is kind of just like a cheat code to think you're making progress without actually making progress. So anyways, I think that, if you want to consistently assess progress over time, then giving yourself a bit of runway to build some momentum is probably a prudent move.
Yeah, I agree. And the only thing I will add is I don't necessarily think you need to go from like the okay, week one is 5 RIR, 4, 3, but at least I would say a 2 in the beginning and being
Yeah.
honest
And
there.
and the way that I program it too, if this person is aware, is I approach the short overload movements different than the lengthened ones. And so I don't think it's like the worst in the world if you were to go like 1 to 2 RIR on a short overload movement right out of deload, like the fatigue is super low, etc. I mean, even if you were to go to failure on like a lateral raise or a bicep curl, I don't think that that's really that big of a deal. I would think it more to like the lengthened compound movements as something where you would maybe want to ramp up a little bit slower. Um, Aaron, do you prioritize seasonal foods?
I mean, I would say probably one of my all-time favorite times of the year are when those strawberries are just so perfectly ripe that they taste like candy. I would prioritize that feeling very high in my memories and things I look forward to in the future. Um, Aside from that kind of joke, not really. I mean, like winter squashes when they come around, the my favorite being the delicata squash in the fall time when things are available. But with modern farming practices and stuff, you can pretty much have things available at any point. I don't overly do any prioritization of seasonal foods really. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, I don't either. And I was actually laughing about it when I read this question because literally just yesterday, right before reading this question, I went to the grocery store and I saw that they had bags and bags of delicious looking red cherries. And my first thought was, what the fuck are red cherries doing in the middle of January? And so of course they're from like, South America or something like that. But my household is obsessed with cherries and the kids have been begging for them since summer. Like every week it's like, can you get cherries? And I'm like, they're not in season. We can't get them. So I got to the store yesterday and I bought 3 bags of red cherries and and we ate an entire bag and a half literally in one sitting between me and the 2 kids. So very much not seasonal, but yeah, I love a good summer fruit for sure.
Real quick before we jump into this next one, Brian, how are you on time? I know this one
I
will
mean,
probably bleed over.
I have to leave at normal by 7:15, so we have 12 questions left. It looks like. Do we want to hit like a couple more and then we can finish the last ones up to start next episode?
Let's do that. Let's see how many we can get through here. I'll
Yeah,
kick this
cool.
this next one over to you. How
Yep.
do you approach gym anxiety? So the background being here, leg day, hours prior, worried about waiting for machines in the crowded gym.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways you can think about anxiety here. There's the anxiety of like, oh my God, I have this really hard leg day, and I'm already thinking about how painful it's going to be to try and hit those 4 plates per side for 10 reps on the hack squat, to use Aaron's example. Um, and then there's also the anxiety of, well, what if I have to wait 20 minutes for that hack squat? And then I'm just like sitting there building anxiety as I'm waiting for this machine. Or maybe the anxiety is literally just the waiting for the machine. Um, and so I think there's a few different ways to answer that based on what the actual clarification is there. As far as the anxiety about having a hard set that you have to do on leg day, uh, I kind of like that. There's like a sense of me that's kind of like, that anxiety and those butterflies in there kind of get me amped up a little bit and get me excited for that experience. Like that experience is kind of why I go to the gym is to push beyond boundaries and exceed my own expectations type thing. So I think that anxiety is kind of fueling in a way. As far as waiting for crowded machines in a gym, yeah, dude, that sucks. I mean, that gives me anxiety too. That's actually probably my least favorite part of going to visit San Diego as we're doing for this 6-week trip coming up is knowing that I have to go to a commercial gym where I can't just go at the pace that I want to go. Um, and so the way that I usually handle this is as soon as I walk into the gym, before I do anything, I walk to the machine that I want and I will place my gym bag next to it and then ask the person how many sets they have left and basically claim that spot as next up. So whether they have 1 set, 2 sets, 4 sets, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to set my bag down. I'm going to claim I'm next. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to go fill my water bottle up, make my protein shake, update Instagram, whatever, warm up, whatever I need to do that isn't that machine. That's what I'm going to do after I claim next. And so that for me, at least provides me with something to do than just sit there waiting for the machine. So I think that is helpful. You can always ask to work in with people depending on their strength level. Like it's difficult on like a hack squat, obviously, if one person's doing 4 plates and the other person's doing 1 plate or something like that. But there's no reason you also couldn't go and do a antagonist movement while you're waiting as well. So like if you're, say, hack squat is the thing you're doing, there's no reason you couldn't go start with leg curls, because leg curls will have no negative impact on the hack squat and may in fact have a positive impact, by warming up the hamstring, pushing some blood flow in there, giving you something more cushiony to kind of move off of through the range of motion. So I think there's a number of ways you can kind of deal with that. I empathize, though. I'm not a really huge fan of waiting for machines either.
I agree. However, something that I think this is one of the things of like spending time outside of the United States. Like here, people just work in with everyone. Like I'll say like, hey, how many sets do you have left? If it's like one, like you're like, okay, cool, I'll wait. Anything more, it's like just work in. Like obviously, like Brian said, if it's a hack squat or something plate loaded, and you're maybe a small female and the dude on it's like a 300-pound bodybuilder, probably not going to be worth it. But anything that's like selectorized or pin loaded, where it's very easy to change the weight, like just work in with people. It's one of the things where like, obviously don't get me wrong, I am the first person, like social anxiety, even in the gym, which is like literally my domain, I still get super social anxiety in the gym. But like you're literally going to stand there like 10 feet away and watch them of like a 7-minute period. They're going to be using the machine for maybe like 45 seconds, and there's a whole shit ton of wasted time. Like people are generally pretty nice. The people that say no, you can't work in with them, like they're just fucking douchebags and horrible people anyway. So like whatever, their life's going to turn out however it will because of them choosing to be that way. But that is kind of what it is there. Then the last thing on the leg day sort of thing, like I get what Brian said. Like it kind of, I get anxious about it, but it's like a good nervous anxious. I just love that feeling of like I'm gonna beat it. That what I was able to last week. Like I just love progress, and I wouldn't say I love the feeling afterwards where like my heart's beating out of my chest and I feel like I'm gonna like vomit and stuff, but I feel so accomplished in that moment, um, that I love it. But it only does show up for like leg day, like RDLs or any kind of hip hinging heavy and like a squat pattern. That's it. I don't get anxiety of like, am I gonna add a rep to my like dumbbell chest press today? Like I don't give a shit really, but the leg day for sure. So I do still get that every single week.
Yeah. Kind of a related question, maybe. The next one up is, how do you pump yourself up for the gym?
I've never needed to. The only times where I have not been excited to go to the gym in the last 20 years of my life are when my body was so broken that I didn't need to be going in the first place, or when stress is so high that I don't really need to be going in the first place and I need to remove things from my life and like chill and sleep a lot, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're a regular gym goer and it's just part of your lifestyle, it's part of your habit, um, you don't need to pump yourself up because it's just what you do. It's literally like brushing your teeth or going to the bathroom in the morning or something like that. Um, and related to this as well, I've talked about this before, but I like the approach of almost trying to remain a little bit more parasympathetic when you go to the gym, instead of trying to pump yourself up. So I purposefully listen to like kind of more mellow music, which I still find can be invigorating. And I know Aaron doesn't fully agree with me on this one, but I do listen to more mellow music, and I do try to not amp myself up per se. Like before a big set, I don't sit there and like hyperventilate and go like, oh, come on, let's do this. Like those aren't like my things. Like I don't do those things. I just try to stay like much more inside my head and just kind of like focus on the job that needs to be done. And it's really just like, hey, business as usual type thing. So I think that there's definitely merit in that approach.
I do agree with that. The one thing I will say is I've reserved the like the sympathetic, in purposefully inducing the sympathetic for only lower body training.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a tool. It's like a kind of like a it's like whatever, a Madden game, like you have your boost button. If you just press the boost button every day, like it doesn't fucking work anymore. But when you need it on certain things, like
Yeah.
it's there, and that's what I will do. There's like certain playlists that I will only allow myself to listen to on leg days and those sorts of things. But yeah, I just enjoy it, really.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you want me to take this next one, Brian?
Yeah. Is there any merit to increasing calories for a period to raise your BMR?
I mean, potentially, if you have a tendencies of under consuming or being a little bit fearful of eating more food because you think you're going to get fat or something like that, I would say there is merit into, I would say, hiring a coach to guide you through that, to increase calories. Your BMR will increase pretty much as an adaptation to the increased energy environment. I
Yeah.
don't think that there is going to be any kind of long standing, um, I guess, like permanent positive adaptations to the BMR. Like your BMR, to a degree, is going to be dynamic relative to the feeding environment you are providing it. But like I said, if you have been historically kind of someone that underfeeds yourself or kind of undereats, especially out of concerns, spending months increasing calories, doing it slowly, intelligently, to help work back some of those fears, and working with someone can be very, very, very beneficial for just getting over those fears. And you may get some positive hormonal and metabolic adaptations from a higher food environment.
Yep. Isn't it the case, like most studies show, that if you are the same weight and eating the same calories, that your BMR is going to be the same? Like if you're 180 now and you're eating 2,500 calories, then if you go up to 200 and you're eating 3,500 calories, but then you come back down to 180 and you're eating 2,500 calories again, your BMR is basically going to be the same at 180 again as it was before.
I would imagine that the research does say that. Can't necessarily think off the top of my head of reading any. That being said, I do think if there was a very hands-on, nuanced approach, there might be a way to kind of wiggle outside of that a little bit. But reporting that at a population level, I don't think will ever be done.
Yeah, no, good point. Okay, cool. Well, I think we should cut it there. The next question, it sounds simple. It's, when doing cardio, should I do it by minutes or calories burned? And so I actually want to talk about that a little bit more detail. And I think that'll be a good one to start next week.
Let's do that. So, as always, guys, thank you for listening. We will be back next week with part 2 with technically February Instagram Q&A, but we'll rope it into January. So,
Yep.
as always, thank you for listening. Brian and I will catch you next week.